Sí, exactamente. Para el CEO es porque decimos jefe de cómo y ahí sale. Eso sí que vivo. Entonces con lo que estoy manteniendo el costo de vida aquí está.
Hello, how are you? Great to see you. Oh, sorry to hear that.
Hiciera una necesidad.
Of course.
Nos han contactado.
Yeah. I know, there is almost probably things piling there. So.
Si alcanzo a match,
sorry? Yeah, it's good. It's on. We are almost done. Let's give it 1 minute.
Hey, Jason. Good, welcome. I'll bring everybody inside.
Yeah, 1 minute. We're
1 minute,
starting in
sure,
1
1
minute.
minute.
Interactuar directamente con el portal, con las herramientas de desarrollo. Y aquí ustedes saben.
Okay, I think it's time to start. So, good evening everyone. My name is Andrzej Kaminski, and together with Willie, Ilse and Martin, I am co-organizer of this event. Now, I see again that we've got a lot of new faces around. So, the first question might be coming, okay, why are we here? Why DevOps? And if you think about DevOps, there is most probably a huge number of definitions. Everybody is thinking about this in a totally different way. But today, DevOps is a mainstream. Is actually something that is almost becoming like a household name. So there are different flavors of DevOps. When you hear that DevOps is most probably the root is really evolved over a period of time into multiple different areas. So we've got the DevSecOps, we've got the GitOps, we've got the DataOps, we've got the CloudOps, we've got AIOps, we've got machine learning ops, and of course, we've got NoOps. So how to make sense of this? Like, what's the difference between them, and what is common between them? I think there is a couple of items that is shared by all those definitions. And the very first one, the most important, is the culture. Is the way how we think about approaching problems, how we solve those problems, how we collaborate. The other one is automation. Without automating what we do, and especially the toil type of work, we will never be able to really be true DevOps. So we need to automate ourselves out of the jobs. Okay, I'm joking. Not so much, but at least that we can focus on the stuff that is really important, where we can actually contribute with our minds and solve the problems. The lean process, having small batches to deliver and learn on the way from the feedback. So metrics, very important. That's another aspect of DevOps. And experimenting. Failure is an option. Failure is okay, as long as we do it, we fail once or twice and we learn from this, obviously. But ultimately, without failure, there is no innovation, and we'll never be able to improve. So what DevOps does, it actually makes those failures low cost. So we can experiment and fail and move forward. So that's in summary what DevOps really is. When you look at the different organizations, some organizations are there already. They do it really very well. Some organizations are approaching. They're slowly getting there, and this meetup is for many of us who are just getting there. And obviously there is a huge number of organizations who pretend that they are DevOps. Oh, because it's cool, so we are using the names and so on, but ultimately the organization does exactly the same what they did before, just calling it different way. So what really is the indicator or measure where the world is going right now among all those organizations? And I think the best measure is what type of people are being sought by organizations. Because when you look at that, then you can see which of those organizations, first of all, are doing it properly. Secondly, which of those organizations are motivated to move into DevOps and they take benefit of that. But also, what we can learn to increase our value in DevOps. What they are looking for, what type of challenges they have. So today, we've got two presentations. The first presentation will be really to answer that question, what is happening on the market right now, where the world is going, where the organizations are going, what they are looking for. And second will be about one of the flavors of DevOps, which is DevSecOps, and specifically we'll be talking about Kubernetes and securing Kubernetes. So very exciting stuff. So let's start, and I'd like to introduce Sted Chen, who is the president of New Value Solutions, and Sted has got many decades of experience in industry. Among others, previously he was director in TELUS, he was director in CGI, and as well, I think at this, you're running business, right?
I used to be a CTO.
Yeah, here we go, and was CTO. So, and now obviously New Value Solutions, you got the first-hand information what's happening on the market and job market. So, welcome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, make sure I have my stuff here. So just so you know, I've never been a DevOps engineer myself. Okay, it was by the time I went over to the dark side of sales and marketing, DevOps wasn't really quite a common occupation. But my background was in software development, software architecture, enterprise architecture, and the whatnot. And like you said, I president of New Value Solutions. I'm going to just spend about a minute on who New Value Solutions is, so that you can understand the basis of where I'm coming from in terms of where we're seeing these actual DevOps needs that's happening in the marketplace. So we provide a lot of management consultants. We're out there talking to CIOs. One of our core focuses is on Microsoft Azure. So we deal with that on the public cloud, and we also have solutions that we deal with on the private cloud. We do a lot of analytics work, which you're going to see comes into play for DevOps. Same with artificial intelligence and a lot of automation. Because we do a lot of custom development, obviously DevOps is a role that we think is very core and is very important. And I'd like to say, when we view DevOps, it's kind of like the Navy SEALs, right? And with DevOps, you'll find that you need to touch on a lot of aspects: security, administration, network, AI, and so on and so forth. And it's really a core central piece towards a lot of the software development initiatives here. I won't go into the industries, but I do want to say where we get a lot of our experience and projects from is we generally work with a lot of enterprise clients, right? So, the genesis of our company was we were providing services to Boeing. So we were, Boeing built us basically as a consulting firm. We've done work with RCMP, governments across Canada, dealing with states within the United States, and so on and so forth. So we do have a fairly broad experience and exposure to projects that do require a lot of DevOps. And a lot of our focus here is really coming from the Azure space and also the implementation of a private cloud and in a hybrid environment. That should be important to you. Those of you as you're in DevOps, you should not ignore the private cloud, because as everyone is maturing in the public cloud, as they look at the environment, what they're discovering is just moving to the public cloud by itself is not really that beneficial. In fact, what you're going to end up doing is costing your operations 3 times the cost if you don't leverage the actual features of the public cloud. The second thing as well is how do you deal with ransomware, right? So we're helping a major state in the US architect their environment, their infrastructure for their developers and for their production, and it's involving both the private cloud and the public cloud and Azure. And the whole premise around the whole architecture is, what do you do if you're ransomware, right? So these things you have to pay attention to when you're in DevOps. But with DevOps here, like I said, I crossed over to the dark side, and I will say this. One of the outlooks, one of the objectives that comes back a lot of times from the marketplace when we talk to a lot of the CIOs and CTOs in the market, they're after just 2 things. How do they modernize their IT ecosystem, the applications and the systems, and how do they secure it? Most organizations have already been hit with cybersecurity. You just probably don't know, right? And it is a problem, and it is a emotional problem. It is a highly stressful problem, but they're always looking for how to modernize it, how to streamline things, how to take advantage of these new features that are in the public cloud, and how to keep it secure. Those are the 2 things that we're finding right now is the only thing CIOs want to talk about, right? And when I say modernize, it's not just moving it off on-premise to a public cloud. It's how to take advantage of the features that's available in the public cloud. But the first thing I do want to say is when we talk about DevOps, cybersecurity has to be front and center. And I think Andre mentioned there's a role called DevSecOps, right? Personally, in our company, we don't actually like that title because everything involves cybersecurity. It's not another role that is, there's not a DevOps and then a DevOps that does cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility. And if it's not an interest of yours, I highly urge you to make it an interest because it is mandatory. I equate cybersecurity to like that of PowerPoint. 25 years ago, 30 years ago, you walk into a company, there's always somebody in marketing that does all your PowerPoint slides, right? That does all the, the animations and does all the shapes and colors and the whatnot. That's 30 years ago. Today, every single professional knows how to use PowerPoint. Every single kid from kindergarten on up knows how to use PowerPoint, okay? And same thing with cybersecurity. It's everyone's responsibility. And so that's why we want to focus a bit on that. Obviously, there's a lot of automation tools out there that allows you to set the policies and be able to do your job a lot faster so that you can actually do things quicker. Create your JSON codes that you need much faster. And because it involves cybersecurity, it's something what we call is a shift to the left. And then it's even more to the left. And what we mean by that is DevOps is no longer a role involved in a project after the project has begun, right? When we involve DevOps in a project, we involve them right at the project charter stage, right at the very beginning, because you're also defining the project risks. You also need to know what's being incorporated with your corporate security and compliance policies and so on and so forth. And I'll even take that one step further. In one of the projects that we are working on here, we actually have the client's DevOps team involved in our architecture design before the project implementation, because the architecture is so sophisticated, it's dealing with how to recover from ransomware. We need their collaborative input, the DevOps people's input into the design of things. It's not just looking at the consumers and the business systems, it's looking at the whole ecosystem. So that collaboration with DevOps is actually very, very important. And as well, when you're in DevOps, you got to talk to the cybersecurity team and so on and so forth. But DevOps, I believe, is having its profile raised higher and higher because of cybersecurity. Now, obviously, when you're dealing with cybersecurity, you've also got to do continuous monitoring of your environments. We've had situations where we've had a client where they were cyber attacked, and it wasn't through the front door. It was actually through the back door, on Azure, through the back door, where they loaded up software, they started running scripts, they were doing reconnaissance work, but luckily we were able to capture, secure it, and they had gone as far as loading a bunch of software up there, and we were able to stop it. And then we had to go through a process with the DevOps folks at the client to go through, okay, this is the do's and don'ts. These are the things that you've learned. These are the things that we need to improve upon in terms of policy, okay? Because access to illegal access or bad actor access comes in many shapes and forms, right? Including through the back door, through the development side as well. Oh, sorry. You'll get a copy of this PowerPoint. You'll see these points up there as I go through. One thing I will say, and I hear this sometimes with DevOps folks, is it's not just DevOps. It's everybody. Is AI? Is all this automation going to eliminate our jobs? From a DevOps perspective, no, it's not. Are you going to be more efficient? Are you going to be able to do more? Yes, but I'm not going to say you're going to do more with less. You're going to be able to do more by yourself, right? Just like if you ever go to the Midwest, you look at the farms, these huge acreage, these massive farms, it's run by one person. They're taking care of the whole farm, right? Same thing with DevOps. I'm not saying one person's going to run your organization's DevOps. All I'm saying is you are going to be capable to do a lot more and expected to be doing a lot more. So in our organization, all of our DevOps people are quite sophisticated. They have quite a broad range of subject matter knowledge. The experiences, if you're looking at it from a job experience, career growth, value to your organization, obviously the experience with automated security scanning, static, dynamic applications, looking at the software compositions of libraries. Those are all obviously important tools to have experience with. The ability to write infrastructure as code, to comply with policies, and to write these things in a code format is important. It helps to eliminate misconfigurations and so on and so forth. Now, one thing people say is, isn't that going to eliminate our jobs? No, it's not. Because a couple of things. First of all, those things still do come back with errors. And even if they don't, you still need a subject matter expert to look at that JSON code, to look at the policies, to determine, is this right? Okay, so you still need that subject matter expert. A very simple illustration is, I've got a brother that's 16 years older than I, and I used to always make a joke to him when he became a pharmacist that as I got a little older, I used to say to him, why would you ever become a pharmacist? You know, there's vending machines that take credit cards these days, right? Couldn't they do what you do? In theory, yeah. But in practicality and reality, no. You still need a certified subject matter expert to be able to dispense the drugs. And here, you need a certified subject matter expert to make sure policies don't collide, to make sure that you're not contradicting what one person, what you want to achieve on one project is compromising what you want to achieve on another. Because a lot of the things that we're doing, that I'm talking about here, the automation, the scanning, is not a corporate-wide thing. It's something specific to the project. This project may have data governance, data sovereignty issues. That is a subset of the corporate policy, for example, and you need to be able to understand that and apply that to your project as well there. Obviously, understand. I won't go too much into container. I know Tagara, who's speaking next, they have solutions around that. But obviously, container security is something that, if you're not familiar with, is something that you should be, because application developers love developing using containers like Kubernetes containers. And Tagara's going to talk about some of the stuff they have in that regards. And obviously, identity and access management, managing the keys, the API keys, the secrets and the assets that you have, and so on and so forth. So these are experiences that we look for in somebody with DevOps. Very different today than the first DevOps person we hired. It was over a decade ago. And I remember the project team had given our office a call, and they're saying, we're not really quite sure what we're looking for. We need the person to do this with CI/CD, but I don't know if it's a system administrator or maybe it's a developer. And I'm not really sure what we need. Yeah, but then they also need to know something about networks too. You know, as the whole DevOps field has matured, I think it's become a lot clearer. Like Andre says, there's a lot of different names for things, and everyone likes different names for things. I mean, I heard of a title a couple of months ago. They want an output manager. What's an output manager, right? So there's a lot of different names, but don't let that deviate from the fact that these are the common core skills of a DevOps professional, the things that we talk about here. In terms of skills, that's important. Obviously, I can't urge enough about the whole aspect around cybersecurity. When you're doing your DevOps roles, check out the OWASP, the top 10 vulnerabilities every so often. Make sure that the code that you're promoting through doesn't violate any of those top 10 vulnerabilities, right? Like I said, a lot more of the cyber attacks are not through the front door. It's through the back door. It's through bad actors. It's through compromised actors. It's through phishing, and so on and so forth. And your scope of knowledge, it's got to involve the cloud. And I say both public cloud and private cloud. It's got to involve the understanding of networks and infrastructure, encryption, firewall technology, and so on and so forth, and user authentication. These are all skill sets that you need as a DevOps engineer, and that we look for in people. And that's why I'm saying it's very much like a Navy SEALs type role. And you also got to know the regulations. Yeah, if you're in healthcare, you have to understand HIPAA, for example, right? And financial services has their, and you say, well, why do I need to know that? You need to know that because they help govern the policies that you're setting up and configuring. And you're working with these AI tools and these automation tools, and you need to be able to know what to feed it to get the output that you need, and then you need to ensure that they comply with the different regulations, right? And what that's also really doing is it's actually elevating you in terms of your strategic focus and your importance to the organization. You're not just somebody in the back room tinkering with technology, but you are being very strategic in actually keeping the company compliant, protecting the company's IP and assets, and aligning the company with its vision as well. The other aspect, and everyone's, it's a hot topic for everyone, is AI. This is the biggest threat for everyone, is what happens with AI. And our DevOps guys are using Copilot right now. They're using ChatGPT to write various JSON codes to help them with policies and so on and so forth. They're setting up things in Azure, and they're having ChatGPT write the code. Yeah, like I say, it can write the code. It'll speed up the writing of the code for you. But you still got to know what it is it's writing. You still got to know what it is that it's applying. You still need to be that subject matter expert. The other area where AI can help is in terms of cybersecurity protection of your development environment, right? You need that actual cybersecurity tool, because it does help with a couple of things. It streamlines a lot of the cybersecurity protection. It also allows you to adapt in real time, quickly. It's not something that you can rely on a cybersecurity team in your company. It's something you need to monitor and adapt in your development environment quickly and in real time. And also with AI, it can also make adjustments to various policies if it sees inappropriate activity or activity that they feel it becomes a threat. So what happens is, from a cybersecurity standpoint, in your DevOps environment is you move from a position of being reactive to one that's being proactive to protect your environment, okay? And these things are going to become more and more important, especially as technology moves to the world of using, down the road, not right now, but down the road with quantum physics, right? The speed of how things are moving at, and we're involved. We have an AI solution, a cybersecurity solution. We're involved with doing some research with universities in Europe, and the whole aspect around quantum computing and the distribution of keys and so on and so forth is something that is very, very real. It is real. It's gonna be sprung upon the world, I think. For me anyways, it was just like how AI all of a sudden came up onto the scene, right? And that's what's gonna happen from a quantum computing standpoint as well. Actually, before I go off on there, I think one thing from a career standpoint that would be good is to pay attention to layer 7 level cybersecurity solutions, okay? These type, I'm not going to go into a lot of details about it, but this type of cybersecurity solution is at an application level. So to give you a very rudimentary example, you're actually securing the tunnel from, let's say, the device here, and if you're talking to an HR application, case management system, whatever it may be, you're actually securing the tunnel, not to the firewall, not to the VPN server. You're securing it right to the actual SQL database call, if you have any, in the actual software application. In other words, it's compiled. It's compiled. The moment you have to install a piece of security, you've created what we call a gap. There is a gap for penetration. The only way to eliminate that is with layer 7 type technologies to secure that. And I mentioned this to you because I don't care who you work for, and some of you I know are just entering the workforce. All of your systems and applications one day is going to be secured like that. It will be, right? And it's going to make today's VPNs, today's firewalls, and so on and so forth, virtually obsolete from that standpoint, okay? So if you have a chance to look up layer 7 type cybersecurity solutions, it's something worthwhile to do, and you will be, I assure you, at some point in your career in the coming years, you will be incorporating that, and you need to understand what that is all about. So from a career standpoint, obviously, as we talked about, is moving more from a manual to an automated environment in terms of your responsibilities. Obviously, you need to understand cybersecurity. You also need to be involved in the planning of it much earlier. It's going to impact how you create your development environments and your policies and so on and so forth. You're going to also need to maintain the AI models, right? The AI needs something to feed it, to think on, right? It still needs the information. You're still going to need to maintain those types of models, and obviously to be able to stay on top of regulations, to stay on top of your corporate policies and so on and so forth. And you as a professional become much more elevated as a strategic subject matter expertise in infrastructure as well as application. Like when I say application, you're not going to be an application developer, but you do need to know how to program, right? When you're doing your CI/CD, you need to be maybe not the first, but a line of defense for the integration of code so that you know it's not compromising cybersecurity levels. And I assure you, if it doesn't already happen in your organization, it will happen where there are audits on the code, evaluations of the code, and when they find gaps, it's not only just the developers they're going to look at as to why is this code like this, it's also the DevOps engineers. Why did you allow this code to go through if it didn't meet these cybersecurity requirements, right, or best practices? All right, so feel good about the career you're in. I think it's exciting. I mean, if I was still programming today, you know, DevOps would be something that I would be very excited about, and also embrace it. You guys need to understand coding. You need to understand cybersecurity, system administration, networking, AI, and so on. You need to be involved and understand all that, and you are going to be a indispensable and a highly valuable component for not only executing your company's projects, but also protecting the data, the intellectual property, PII, and so on and so forth, that is of your organization. All right? So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to ask, or ask at the end. Okay?
We have a couple of minutes right now for questions from the audience. So
let's use this opportunity. Any questions for staff? Well, I'm here. Go.
yeah. I'll ask one.
Hey, you talked about that within DevOps, people who are in the role now, they should be pretty safe for the job as they're going in. Where there's always going to be that need for the SMEs going forward. In my role, I'm kind of also thinking of where we're going to be at in about 5 years. And one of my concerns has been not so much for the people currently in the role. I think the people currently in the role are pretty good. It's like, how do we build up the next generation of people coming into DevOps? Especially when the barrier to entry is going to be so much higher because we have all these tools now doing the lower entry stuff for us.
I know what you're saying. Sorry. Because what you're saying is, where are these guys going to get the experience, right? And there is going to be a level of abstraction that you are going to have to rely on. It's a chasm. We call it, I know what you're saying, it's a chasm we haven't fully crossed. An example of that chasm is, we do a lot of Azure software development. Like we have a pretty 85-person project team. When someone comes and applies for a job for this one client, when they apply for this one project, when someone applies for a job, if you're a senior developer, and this is an actual real statistic, if you're a senior developer, we will fail about 98% of them on a .NET exam to work on a project with us. The reason why, they're not stupid people, they're very good, is that when they're developing, they're so used to developing with all these different libraries that are already built. There are some basic commands and basic functions they wouldn't even know how to write. And for this one project, like we do some stuff that's, we have projects that are classified, but projects that are of a various different nature, right? We've got some things that are governed by treaties and regulations, and there's certain libraries that we can and can't use. So when we're coding for stuff, you actually have to write the raw code, and you can't use third-party libraries to cover for it, right? And what you're saying is the same thing. So yes, you're going to need to have as many people now work and gain as much experience. Over time, that gap of people having the experience, it's going to be covered over. In software development, it was covered over with all these different pre-planned or pre-coded libraries. Our hope, through the use of AI, those things become a lot more solidified, so that if you use an aspect of AI or an aspect of automation, the results that it generates is perfected and it's correct. It's not there today, okay? That's why you don't see an answer to that question today, because it's not there today. So right now, you're in a good time. You have access to do all these roles and tasks. Do it. Learn it as much as you can, because down the road, that level of understanding is going to be abstracted, okay? And then when it is abstracted, and I don't know how it is, but when it is abstracted, do you trust that level of abstraction, or you may be forced to trust it? You might not have a choice, right? Does that answer your question there?
Yeah, although there is still that point of, like you actually gave the examples of sometimes there's going to be roles where you can't use that level of abstraction.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there always still is going to be roles and work for people to do those things, right? Like if you look at a database administrator today, I don't think we employ a single database administrator anymore, right? Every developer knows how to administer a database, right? They know how to set up the clusters and so on and so forth. But they know how to use the database services in Azure very well, right? So, do we ever have a project where we could use a database administrator? Yeah, that's possible. And then we would go get one, or someone needs to get trained up on it, right? I think you're asking me a question that it's not a black and white answer, right? How many people know how to open up a router and fix the inside of it? Not many, right? My router breaks, I'm just gonna go to Best Buy and get a new one, or call Cisco and put a new router in. But there's somebody out there that knows that, and it's a lot less people that do know that, yeah. And there's lots of people that's needed to know that, right? So in the future, some of the manual tasks that you're doing, there'll be a lot less people needed to do that because of automation and AI. Does that help? Does that help answer?
Yeah.
Yeah? So, okay. I don't know if I answered it that well, but yeah.
I think in summary, I would say that security is in insecurity. In other words, we always have to be on the toes. Watch what's happening, the technology, learn. You cannot stop. Let's be honest, how many couple developers today are needed? And there are some of them, but if I would like to try to find today a couple developer, how many people actually would be interested in joining a great organization that actually does couple development? How many people would be interested in doing that? See? And actually there are opportunities, and they pay well, right? The reason is because obviously this doesn't grow. But the bottom line is, I think for all of us, and that's the purpose of this meetup, among others, is really to learn from each other, see what the trends are, right? And especially there's a lot of things, a lot of uncertainty at this point with AI. Where the AI is going to go? How it's going to evolve the market? How the thing is going to change? So it's exciting time. I think and that's what the DevOps is about. Being comfortable with uncertainty, right? And getting to that point is hard because as humans we prefer the structured way. Well, the world's changed. That's reality, right? Any other questions?
Hey Doc. So you talked about the layer 7 security as an example, like if we want to secure the connection between the end user and the database itself. And now you were talking about the WAF, like how to deploy a WAF in infrastructure, or you would rather like talking about the ORM,
Probably what's best is that, like, it's not a simple answer, and it depends on how you apply it. That's what
because there's like a lot of players there.
Yeah, right? That's right. Exactly.
Now I can deploy a WAF and it can analyze and learn how to filter bad requests and good requests.
Right.
I can improve my ORM in my developing process and to put like stronger functionality. So what you were exactly pointing out?
What I'm pointing out is the advancement and continued improvement of what's happening with cybersecurity.
Oh.
Right. That's where it's going. We see everything going to the layer 7 level.
Exactly.
So because of that, knowing I know how VPN works, or whatever, it's not good enough. Okay. Right? You need to continue to advance yourself, especially when you're dealing with custom software code, right? Okay. The whole philosophy, the whole principle around the layer 7 technology, as you pointing out here, it involves going right into the code. So you, as a DevOps person, needs to understand what is happening with the code and the cybersecurity aspect before you can possibly integrate it and deploy it. It's confident, right? And because you're also a line of defense for the application. That was the whole point behind that. Right? I wasn't talking about this way or that way better.
Yeah.
No, that's, you know, if you're going to talk about that, I'll get one of my architects. You don't want to talk to me about that. Trust me. Okay. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm just gonna like point out for something else, which is like in like most of your talk today, you pointed out like how relying are you on a cloud service, right? Now this is like something I've noticed like from, let's say, the western part of the world, how dependent and relying they are becoming big time on cloud technology. Unlike, let's say, the other part of the world, like let's say in the IT companies in Middle East or in UAE, where they're still holding to the idea that I must possess the assets, like what's called like in the on the premises, like so. As a DevOps, like I really find it hard to even convince the stakeholders to go for the hybrid structure or even the on-prem with the Azure, for example. That's why I think that why hyper-conversion and VMware solutions like shines a lot like over there. So coming from like a completely different, like radical other side of the mindset, do you think it's a good idea to completely rely on cloud?
No. Like by cloud, I'm assuming you're referring to like the public cloud,
Yeah.
like AWS.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
In fact, there are, I don't know if it's law or it's industry policy in certain parts of Europe. If you're in this industry as a company, you can't have more than 1/3 of your compute on one vendor, right? You can't go and put everything you have on Azure, or you can't put everything you have on AWS. You have to distribute it across. One of the examples I gave earlier about shifting left, where you have to get in front of the project at the project charter stage. Remember I said, in fact, you even go even further left because it's to your advantage to understand what's happening with the architecture design before the project, right? Mm-hmm. In that example, our company's actually doing the consulting to this state where we're designing the infrastructure to protect them from ransomware. That infrastructure includes public cloud. They want to be a public cloud. They want to be a cloud first. That's their objective. But in terms of protecting against ransomware, there is a component of the solution that is that's done on the private cloud, and that is going to help. Nothing is ever a guarantee 100%.
Especially in the edge cloud, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's on the private cloud. We are working on systems right now where it's using not just microservices but micro apps. We're distributing the actual application on both the public and the private side, and only using the public for the services that you really want to use it for. And you do it for a couple of reasons. One is it is cost savings. So there's latency issues you got to do, okay? Mm-hmm. But there are cost savings around that, and there's also cybersecurity reasons. And in fact, the example I gave for the backup with the public-private cloud, in theory, you could actually do that same model, just keeping it in the one public cloud, okay?
Okay.
But we don't recommend it, first of all, right? And even, if I speak about it from an Azure standpoint, even Microsoft's own material doesn't recommend you do that. And I just want to make sure we're clear on something here. I'm just going to digress a bit. When we're talking about protecting your data and we're talking about backing up, backups are not a cybersecurity solution. Okay, so we really understand that, because we've had a lot of clients call us, hey, can you help us with this? Can you help us with that? Because they've been cyber attacked. Their backups are no good, so you never know when they were. It could have been 5 years ago that they were put in, right? So there are architectures around a hybrid cloud that involves, in our case here, Azure, and we use Cohesity as a solution that we use to scrub the data, not just say scrub the data, to validate, check the data, and we put things into a private cloud for that particular reason, for recovery from ransomware. Okay, so yes, if anything, private cloud is making, or it's going to grow. Absolutely, it is going to grow. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much. We have to move to the next speaker, but before you go, one quick question. So, year and a half, 2 years ago, market was hot. Like, it was very difficult to find people. Today, there is downturn. Where do you see the market is going in this moment? Which direction?
What are my options? Sorry, I'm not sure I understood your. I'm sorry.
So at this point, a lot of organizations actually laid off people, right? There is a downturn, market downturn.
Oh, yeah.
What do you see in the market at this point?
We don't see an issue for engineers, DevOps, developers, PMs. We don't really see that. A lot of, not all, but a lot of the actual layoffs that had happened, especially in the US, it is on the skill sets. It's on the jobs where the skill sets doesn't require much subject matter expertise, much knowledge, right? If I just really use a very simplistic example, if you are doing customer support, if I just use that as an example, yeah, I would be concerned, right? But those that are in DevOps and in engineering, development type field, I'm not saying they weren't, like, well, of course they are. I mean, everybody is susceptible to it, but the majority of it didn't come from that area. You still need the people that know, right? You need to know things, and if you know things categorically, you should have a very bright outlook. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
So all the time learning.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the career you guys chose. So otherwise, go into sales. You guys want to sales? Give me a call.
You have to learn too.
Yeah, we still got to learn, but not at such an intense pace.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I would like to welcome our next speaker, and that's Reza Ramansanpur. And Reza was actually our speaker exactly 2 years ago in February 2022. And at the time we were still doing this online. So this is the first time when we see Reza in person. So Reza is going to speak about securing Kubernetes, but Reza is working for Tigera, and Reza is a developer advocate and specializing in Project Calico. So Reza, over to you.
Thank you. So, hello everybody. Let me get the thing started, and hopefully we can talk about Kubernetes. Works. Oh, it's hotspot. Yeah. All right. Stuff happening. I promise this is harder than it looks. yeah, that could actually be better. 11. Yeah. All right. So hello, everybody. My name is Reza, as Andre mentioned. I'm a developer advocate at Tigera, and this is actually not working, so we're gonna do. I used to write bugs for like 16 years in multiple open source projects. Most of them got merged, so if you're using an open source project that I contributed, be very cautious. Just contact me, like if you got any ideas, any sort of thing that you like to talk about, I'm always open to have conversation. So Project Calico. Well, Project Calico is very well known if you have Kubernetes, bare metal services, or any sort of cloud interaction. You have heard about Project Calico. It's actually a way to secure your environment and provide networking. In the enterprise side, it also offers a lot more, like compliance and these sort of stuff. But our focus is going to be the open source part. These are the social handles that you can use to get to know more about Project Calico. We currently have 9,000 people in our Slack channel, and there's like 300 plus people who are contributing to our code base. And it's like around 8 million nodes that are getting spun up. Some DevOps people just scaling up tests or something with Calico. I don't know what that is, but the number is that. All right, so I'm gonna start from cluster deployment. Hopefully it's gonna go step by step to more complicated stuff, but here we are. So you all know about Kubernetes. It usually runs on a server. That server is either a worker or a control plane. So here, in the left side, there is a control plane node which runs the control plane, kubelet, API, scheduler, and kubeproxy. And on the right side, it's the worker node, which runs kubelet and kubeproxy. Each one of these components does some sort of stuff. For example, API is the brain of the organization, and it responds to all sorts of queries that you do. Now, when you want to run a pod or a container or a workload, whatever you name it, then scheduler gets in, and it's like, all right, we got a couple of nodes, nothing is running here. I can take this pod and run it on this node. But then it actually goes to the kubelet agent, which is installed on both control plane and the worker node. And the kubelet is actually the one that goes like, all right, this pod that the scheduler scheduled is going to be running in this node or not. You will see the answer there. You will see the errors in the debug, or you can do the describe or whatever. Anyway, so we're going to talk about API server a bit and the kubeproxy part. The kubeproxy part is actually the networking part, and it's usually baked into, I would say, most cloud providers. So for instance, if you're using Azure, like the previous presenters, then there is either Azure CNI or Calico that you could use. In terms of AWS, there is AWS CNI, or you could, again, use Calico. Same thing for GKE, it's going to be dull. For Alibaba, all the cloud providers use Calico in one way or the other. So, now that we know about cluster deployment, let's talk about cloud networking. So, in most cases, in order to have networking, you will need some physical infrastructure. Now, the physical infrastructure will give you some sort of connection that will lead into the cluster network infrastructure. To give you a better perspective, the cloud provider is usually doing the physical networking infrastructure, or you as a DevOps person in your company have to go jerry-rig some cables, get a switch, put it into an outlet, and provide that layer. So that layer is usually what all the nodes and all the servers are connected to. Now, when you got all the switches and everything in the physical working, then it goes to the part that is cluster networking. Now, cluster networking is the part that the control plane is trying to say, if there's a workload here, it should talk to the other workloads in the other nodes. Because an application, for instance, the example of database needs to talk to some sort of web, because your customer is going to need to see some sort of result. I don't think people will do queries in order to buy something. It's usually that, all right, there's a shiny web page, I'm going to click here, something will happen. So the part about cluster network infrastructure in Kubernetes and some other places like OpenShift, what is the other one? The Red Hat is OpenShift, like the any EKS something, EKS Anywhere, and like other sort of GKE, these sort of stuff, are all compliant with CNI specification. Basically, it's just a way to say, if two workloads want to talk to each other, they need to have IP. I will it down a lot, but that's the gist. So Calico works in this layer. Calico actually provides a way for you to have a data plane and a security posture depending on what you want to achieve in your environment. All right. So in terms of networking, there are a couple of choices that you can make with Calico, which is not available in other solutions. So Calico offers a pluggable data plane, which means you can use the standard Linux data plane, which is built on a Linux networking stack. It's like 25 years of networking, and it directly writes IP table rules, which are like it's like a bouncer with a sheet of paper. Like, these traffics should happen or not. That's it. And it is easy to debug, and if you pick a rock and put it into like Stack Overflow, you will find the answer for that, why this flow is not working or not. We also offer an eBPF data plane. So the eBPF data plane is actually built by Tigera, but it's open source. You can see all the codes and how it talks to the kernel. It uses eBPF programs to implement networking on a kernel level. There are a couple of advantages. For instance, the eBPF data plane is high performance, and it actually uses less utilization because it can intercept packets and flows in the earliest possible path of that flow. To give you a perspective, in order to drop a packet, you don't need it to go through all the chains in the kernel, and you just say, all right, I saw this packet in my networking card, and I'm dropping it. That's the verdict. if you are running a hybrid environment, for instance, this is something that people do in Azure. A lot of Windows users are there. You are sort of familiar with HNS. HNS is the underlying platform that Windows uses to provide networking to pods and containers that it runs. So we do have a data plane built on HNS. It programs Windows-based networking directly into the Windows kernel. We also have a VPP data plane. It's a vector packet processing, which offers a lot of performance in places like 5G, when you need to have a dynamic layer 2 to build a very fluid layer 3, 4, 5, 7. Like all these phones that we got, they are running on a dynamic infrastructure because the whole GSM standard demands it. So if you're in a communication sort of industry, VPP is something to look at. By the way, these are all open source. And these four are what we actually base our enterprise products on. So Calico Cloud and Calico Enterprise that we ship to our customers and they actually pay for it are built on these open source projects. So if you use it, you're actually sort of way ahead. All right, so what is eBPF and when should you use it? Well, as I said, the standard Linux data plane is the thing that you get out of the box. It has a high throughput, don't get me wrong. If you run a Kubernetes cluster on Linux, it performs very well. It gives you fast policy enforcement, like all the IP table rules that you bake into your environment actually work very well. And in terms of services, all the services are also are using IP table rules and routing inside the kernel. So again, everything is fast. It is flexible, so but there's an asterisk. So that asterisk means I have to talk about why. It is flexible. You can actually put in your IP table rules to say, all right, this flow should happen this way. And you can actually do it with a command line. You don't need to like compile anything. Everything is already baked in. And it is easier to troubleshoot. As I said, you can just go to Stack Overflow, copy paste your IP table rule and see why it's not working. There's like 1,000 people who are like, dude, you need to add -A and it needs to be capital. All right, in terms of eBPF. Now, eBPF is designed for 40 gigabit links. Now, standard Linux data plane was designed for 20 gig. So imagine like a hop, it is built for higher speed. So it has higher throughput. It implements policy in a different way. As I said, it can figure out if a packet needs to be dropped or not in the earliest point of entry. And in terms of services, you don't need to go through all the pods that you have and all the resources that you have in your cluster. It's just a BPF program that takes a packet inside the kernel and goes like, This needs to go to the door B. That's it. And flexibility comes with control, right? So you have more control on what you want to do. However, in terms to do it, you need to compile code and push it into the kernel. So you will lose flexibility, which is not something that we DevOps people like to see. Like, I need to be able to modify everything at my disposal. But Calico comes with a troubleshooting toolset that gives you all the points that you will need in order to figure out why something is not working or why something is working, depending on your approach of what you want to do to your company. Something happened, all right. If you like to try any of these data planes, here's a QR code, I will share it at the end. It's just a workshop that you can go through and like gives you all this information, but it will tell you, all right, these are the things that you need to do, these are the resources, these are the commands, what happens, these sort of stuff. All right, so now that we know about the cluster deployment and the networking, let's talk about security. As a DevOps person, we might need to compile some code for our development team. Doesn't happen a lot, but you might get somebody that comes to you with a Docker file and be like, just run this Docker file and give me the environment that I want. So in that context, a workload or a pod or a Docker file, it's actually just a code or a program that runs continuously in an isolation in your environment. That's it. Nothing into it. Like if you run a container, if you build a container, create a pod with like 100 containers in it, again, 100 programs that will run continuously. And as long as they can run continuously, the Kubernetes is happy and it's like, this pod is running, which we like to see a lot. So, in order to secure your environment, you will need to create one of these. So this is actually a resource that you can apply to Kubernetes. It's a Kubernetes policy. Let's say this policy is going to be applied to that environment. So our target is to secure this cluster, and we want these namespaces, green, blue, group system, and these host processes be secure. And by that, I mean, these should be only be permitted to talk to their intended targets and not the internet or any bad actors. By the way, this little code is something that saved a lot of people when they were when the Log4j happened like 2 years ago. It's just very easy to don't let your pods talk to anything, which we actually wrote a blog on it. So, first of all, you need to say, for a Kubernetes policy, you need to say what namespace needs to be protected and what are the endpoints. So for a Kubernetes policy, an endpoint is a pod. So you're actually telling the Kubernetes policy engine, to the policy engine, that in this context, every traffic that happens for certain pods needs to be screened for a flow or a direction. That is the policy types portion. So ingress, incoming, or egress, outgoing. By the way, these are context-based. So for some traffic, your incoming might be the external entities. For some traffic, your ingress might be your internal workloads. So be careful about that. So here, when we said in the namespace blue, all these pods that can match, which is, by the way, that's like every pod, every traffic of each pods that happens in that namespace. When they are going to go outward, so outside of their namespace, outside of their isolation, and they want to talk to some sort of resource or an endpoint in the kube system namespace, and that target or that destination has a pod selector named as K8 app kube DNS. So by the judge of this, we're talking about DNS resolve or NS lookup, these sort of things. So this policy would permit that traffic. And it will block everything else and also all incoming traffics. Now, this is the tricky part. Kubernetes doesn't enforce policies. If you create this and apply it, Kubernetes will say, yes, everything is okay. Because Kubernetes on its own only gives you an abstraction layer. It is your responsibility to create a policy manager. For instance, Calico is a great choice. No alternative motive. All right, so a couple of things about a Kubernetes policy. It applies to namespaces. So if you have like 100 namespaces, you need to create 100 policies to secure your 100 namespaces. It offers a few selectors. In terms of finding a traffic, you need to be very explicit. If you have worked with firewalls, for instance, ASA or PIX or, I don't know, Juniper, there's like a lot of things that will give you the power to say, I want this specific traffic to happen and all other things to not. So in this context, Kubernetes policy might fail you in like some niche cases. We'll get to it why. So there are a few logical expressions. In order to create a policy, you need to say things that match this label or things that don't match this label. However, again, the types of logical expressions that you can do might be a bit limited. We'll get to it why. In terms of endpoints, Kubernetes policies apply to pods and CIDRs. So you can say these pods and you can say these CIDRs, but you cannot say, I want this network card or my second network card or a process that is running inside the host. And it only supports allowed traffics. So by default, Kubernetes policy is everything is allowed. Like you can do whatever you want. You can burn the system. But the minute that you add a policy in, this changes to an implicit deny at the end and whatever you are permitting. All right, so let's talk about how Calico solves some of the issues that we have seen. So here is a Calico policy in its glory. It's a global network policy, which means this one applies to your cluster as a whole. Doesn't matter where the traffic is generated or coming, this will apply to it. Now the selector is not just the pod, it's like everything in your cluster. It could be your networking card, it could be a host processes, it could be anything, any sort of source that can generate networking traffic. So by applying this global network policy from Project Calico, hopefully you installed Calico before, you will immediately apply let's go back to the bouncer. You apply a bouncer that can find everyone in your vicinity and say, all right, I don't care what sort of resource you are, I'm gonna screen you. So it's gonna happen to the blue namespace, to the green namespace, to the cube system, all those processes, and your networking card. And again, similar to Kubernetes policy, this is going to be an egress because we are trying to duplicate what we had with the Kubernetes policy. So I'm going to say, all right, I want all the traffic. However, I want to let the egress or outgoing be permitted. And again, I want this particular policy to work for kubedns or my pods or my workloads that are running DNS. And deny all other incoming traffic. And we missed something? No. And that's about it. Yeah. You get a default deny that denies everything and just secures your cluster. That's it. So, as I said, a global network policy will be applied to everything. So, some people would choose to put an exception for Kube system, which is a namespace that runs most of your Kubernetes components. Calico system and Calico API server, again, internal things that are working in your cluster and needs to be running at all time. So you would add a selector, which is more flexible, offers more, and it's like, all right, if there is a traffic that has a project calico.org name, which means from a namespace. So right at the bat, we said this policy only needs to apply to namespaced namespace scope traffic. And that namespace is not part of these three, apply this policy to it. All right, so why would you use this sort of policy? Well, richer syntax, as I showed you, you can go into the details of your traffic and say these sort of traffic or these other sort of traffic. It gives you more selectors. You can be very specific in terms of labels, in terms of endpoints. You can explicitly dictate the action. So as I said, Kubernetes policies are always permit, but with Calico, you can say this policy or this rule, the action is going to be denied, or this action is going to be allowed, which allows you to create a better sort of policy enforcement and like solve very complicated issues in your environment. It offers, it actually applies to all endpoints. There's a selector, there's a namespace selector and service account selector, which means you can apply it to network cards, host processes, RBACs. RBACs are usernames that all the pods and stuff are using in your cluster, or namespace, like these are the isolation levels of your cluster. All right, so I talked about everything in terms of policy, and let's see what will happen if you just change your data plane to eBPF. So, first of all, when you create that policy, so we're going to talk about a DDoS attack. A DDoS attack is when somebody tries to send a lot of packet to your environment and just saturate either your CPU or some other resources like a network card, traffic, whatever they can get. So what happens is your services will become unavailable to your paying customers, and you will lose revenue. So we don't want it to happen. In the Linux networking stack, or IP tables, when a traffic comes in, it goes to the Linux kernel and the Linux network stack. From there, the earliest point that you can interact with this traffic is the IP tables raw chain. That's it. If there are no sort of policies, then the traffic will flow. There's going to be a routing decisions, like where this traffic needs to end up. If you have everything there, it would either go to your host processes or a pod. If there's a bad actor that comes in and tries to, knock down the door, the first place is actually after your kernel processed all these packets and your networking stack is trying to figure out what is what. So that will create a lot of CPU and RAM utilization on your system, and on top of that, your networking card is going to go crazy. So, in terms of eBPF, it's the same thing in general. There's a kernel and there's a Linux networking stack, the routing decision, and the host processes. So everything is the same. When a traffic comes in, Calico sends an eBPF program to the networking card or the kernel and says, all right, I know this packet needs to go to its destination, which here is the host processes. But let's say the hacker is trying to get in. So it will generate a lot of packets. Now the first thing that happens is the eBPF program in your networking card will drop it. By the way, this doesn't happen automatically. Well, it happens automatically if you're a Calico Cloud user, but if you're an open source user, you actually need to write a couple of policies. In your networking card, some networking cards support eBPF programs. So you basically run your programs that can deny a DDoS attack inside the networking card. If that is not possible, then you could, the Calico eBPF manager will write the program inside the driver. If that is not possible, the Calico eBPF manager will write it in the kernel. So these three earliest points will be your line of defense. And no matter how many traffic you send to it, because these are happening in the kernel or the driver, they're very fast, like crazy amount fast. If you like to try bringing down a cluster, here's a demo. You can run whatever you want on it. It's actually using the XDP eBPF, and it's working, hopefully. By the way, this whole thing that I talked about is available for both our data planes. So even if you're, for some reason, cannot run the eBPF data plane for now, you can actually use this part of XDP eBPF. Because when you create these sort of policies, the Calico Policy Manager actually implement them in eBPF form. All right, one more thing before we get to questions. So encryption. No matter how much you run, how much policies that you run, or how much policies that you write, there's going to be a need for encryption because there's going to be a couple of flows or traffic or databases, whatever, that needs to be confidential. In that case, well, you will need some sort of compliance and a confidentiality. And Calico offers two types of encryptions. Let's say the blue pod wants to talk to the core DNS, and for some reason we like the DNS to be confidential. Well, you can run WireGuard with just one command, which will secure your node-to-node traffic, or you could run Istio with Calico, which will give you MTLS on a pod level. So pod to pod will be encrypted. And we're gonna go to questions, if there are any questions before we start the workshop.
I want to try Minikube with Calico CNI. Do you have any plugins available?
Yes, you just do minikube -- start, I believe, then Calico.
Oh,
That's it.
in documentation, you see Calico, well, Cilium and other things.
No, I believe it's there. I'll have to check it out then.
You can check it.
Yeah, but it's like minikube start -- CNI Calico or minikube -- start Calico. One of these two.
How is that DNS will be encrypted? Like DNS over TLS, or is it instead?
I just realized.
Would you please explain how the DNS will be encrypted? Is that DNS over TLS? What tunnel?
All right, so depending on how you implement the encryption, so if you're using WireGuard, then it will only be encrypted when it leaves your networking card, your physical networking card, right? If you're using Istio with Calico, then it will be encrypted when it leaves your pod. How it will be encrypted? It's in terms of WireGuard, it's going through a VPN connection. WireGuard creates a VPN. It's super fast. In terms of Istio, it will be MTLS, which is like TLS. It's a TCP socket that is secured with TLS certificates.
When you make a policy change, what do you need to do to apply the new policy?
When you do a policy change, what do you need to do in order?
You need to restart.
Oh, you need to restart the policy? So policies happen when you apply them, right? In terms of DevOps, if you're using it in some sort of pipeline, what you could do is just kubectl replace. If they would share the name, the policy engine will just implement IP table or eBPF programs in. That's it. Like you just write the new manifest and either do kubectl apply or replace depending on the name of your policy. Again, these policies are YAML manifests. It's not anything like security groups in like cloud providers that you have to go through the CLI to do something. It's just a manifest. You can store it as a code and like apply it to whatever you want.
So it is like a deployment,
Yeah.
redeployment.
It's basically a deployment manifest.
In a multi-cluster environment, you said it's global policies for everything. When I say everything, I understand that it is for one cluster or it's for all the clusters. That's actually not be a way to have multi-clusters.
So if you have multi-clusters, then Calico provides multi-cluster connection, right? So it gets a bit complicated. It could be for everything in your multi-cluster, or it could be for only one cluster. It depends on how you write your clusters. Why I'm saying that? Because, as I said, there's a lot of selectors, right? You could write a selector that can points out to the other cluster and say, these traffics needs to be protected too. If you want to take it up a notch, you could go with Calico Cloud. It's a free trial. That would actually give you control over all your multi-cluster environments, and you can actually use one cluster to write for the whole sort of setup. There was a, yeah.
How does the DDoS protection work? How do you manage this?
How does the DDoS protection work?
On the network card level.
On the network card level. All right. So I believe it's like Intel IOSRB or something, right? It's an open specification from Intel. There are a bunch of network cards that you can actually talk to the ASIC. You would say, when these functions happen, do these things. So that would be the first one that I said inside the networking card. In some cases, that is not possible because I believe those networking cards are very expensive, and it has been for like 20 years or something. So there's another way, which is like the driver. There are a bunch of networking cards that you can actually use the driver to talk to the ASIC. It's not like the Intel, but it's again very performant. So it depends on what sort of networking card you have, but whatever you write will be bytecodes that will run inside your ASIC in the networking card.
It's XTB offload. So
XTB offload.
XTB offload, then it's
Yeah.
on the card. It's sort of like XTB generic.
Yeah, XTP generic is on the Linux kernel.
Yeah.
Offload is the driver.
Sorry, offload is in the NIC itself.
NIC itself.
Then there's like XTB native.
Yeah.
And then there's XTB generic.
Yeah.
Depending which one the card supports, depends where it's implemented. Native is what you want. You want the ASICs.
Yeah, but that would require that specific. Yeah.
Expensiveness.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, you're answering with me. Any sort of question, DevOps or Project Calico?
I'll do a follow-up. So we also have like the firewall stuff, which is actually looking at the DDoS protection, right? Let's say I have a WAF or stuff. So my question was also on how does the network card or the EVM program or whatever, it's the entire tool chain, right? How does it know that the DDoS is actually happening? Like, how do you filter out?
All right. So you have a firewall before your cluster, right? So your first line of defense is that one, unless you're using a couple of integrated.
Gateways and APGs, sort of things.
No. There are a couple of firewalls that can be integrated with Calico. So Calico will know a DDoS is happening. Again, you're either trying to spend money or spend time, right? If you want to spend time, you can write a script, it will figure it out. If you want to spend money, you can get the Calico Cloud or Enterprise that has a policy recommender and an AI integration that would do it for you. So again, it depends on what you want to do. Which one? Do you have more time or more money?
Yeah, so what you're saying is essentially there is some intelligence which tells the program that the DDoS is happening, and
So
then it drops the packet.
there's an intelligence that can write policies, and that policy recommender can say, all right, there's this thing happening because your pattern has changed. It could be DDoS, it could be anything else.
DDoS that many people do sounding complex because generally at the application level layer, we generally use, let's say, a friend. Any, let's say, web traffic, I'm dividing into two things. For example, mobile traffic, let's say mobile payments or web payments.
Okay.
Then the friend gate would be not, because you said the Calico is installed in the clusters, right?
Okay.
Before going to cluster, let's say my API endpoint is running on APG in cloud AWS. I want to put in on-prem. So the mobile traffic coming to the APG, there I'm going to say, hey, the request is coming from same source, same IP, and then itself, instead of routing to my environment. So they have some concepts of rate limiting, all this stuff, right? So when they retry, it will say, oh, the same request is coming 10 times from the same source, block it for some time, 5 minutes, then I can allow it. So this way I'm saving more than allowing them to enter into that request into my cluster itself. That's more workload for my cluster, right?
So there are various levels that you can do DDoS. The one that you are talking about is actually using sessions, and I'm assuming you're talking about a web page sort of thing, because in that case, the scenario that you taught is when your web server creates a session, it needs to create another session, another session. I talked about the networking level, right? However, if you want to do it in an application level, I believe there is something in Calico Cloud called Skimble that uses BPF programs to look into the kernel and all the, let's say, headers of your web application and figure out what is happening and where. You could write filters and those sort of stuff for it to, because Calico Cloud and Enterprise come with a WAF, so you could use that thing. But again, it depends on, would you like to spend money or time? If you want to spend money, yeah, cloud providers do provide mitigations as well. But again, that is not auto-magically. You need to configure a couple of things. So, if something is happening auto-magically, be very cautious, because like computers are great, but there's a human that wrote that code. So
visualizing the use case, not for the amount. Once we know the use case, exactly where we need help, in what scenario, probably not helps.
So that that workshop is actually with a use case. I believe it's a Redis database.
Okay.
So again, it depends on what sort of scenario, because we're talking very generic or general sort of. Yeah. Any other questions? Awesome. If you guys want to like take a 5-minute break to start the workshop after, I'm all for it, because I cannot speak anymore for at least like 5 minutes.